In today's show, the Blazers wheel and deal and get the heck up out of the second round. Now they got a mostly full roster and we're days away from free agency. What's next? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, day 2 of the NBA draft, the first ever day 2 of the NBA draft concluded on Thursday evening, and the Blazers came away with nada. I mean, they got some cash and some future second-round picks, but no new players added to the roster. We'll talk about what they did and did not do in the second round. We'll talk about the implications. The roster's full. It is similar to full in that if they were just to bring the whole group back, if they guarantee everybody's salary, they are full up 15 players under contract if they were to go that route and fully run it back. That would be wild. I don't think they're going to do that, but with free agency just a couple days away, we'll talk about the implications of the moves they've made so far with in terms of where they sit with the luxury tax, etc., and what to look forward to ahead as the silly season in the NBA starts in earnest on Sunday. Let's start with the draft stuff, and then we'll get into everything else. The money, the implications, and the look ahead. Just as a real teaser to late in the show, Joe Cronin there's just a player's name he refuses to mention, and I think it's pretty telling. Let's start with the draft, though. Now let's actually start with the draft. Blazers went into the day starting with 34 and 40. Early picks in the second round, and while they didn't have a ton of roster spots available, in fact, basically one, if I guess they could have as many as 3 if they were to not bring back Toumani Camara, Jabari Walker, and Delano Banton, but that always seemed unlikely. So really, you're drafting for two-way contracts, and at 34, that would be the earliest drafted player, highest drafted player to ever receive a two-way contract. 34 always, and if you listen to the podcast, I had said that a bunch. It's the 34 seems a little rich for two ways. So really, it seemed inevitable that they were going to make some move somewhere because they just didn't have space. And then they just started wheeling or dealing. They traded 34. Well, I guess they traded the draft rights to Tyler Kolek, who went at 34, the point guard from Marquette, to the New York Knicks in exchange for 3 future second-round picks. Those picks, according to Jake Fisher of Yahoo Sports, are a 2027 pick from Minnesota, the worst of the 2029 picks between Indy and Washington. We'll see what that means. Those second round picks are always going to be a little bit dicey, but I think there's a chance that Washington's still bad and Indy's not that good, and that ends up being an okay 2029 pick. And then a 2030 pick from New York. So picks in 27, 29, and 30. They had sent out 2 future second-round picks in the Deni Avdija Malcolm Brogdon swap, sent 2 picks to Washington in that deal, so they end up netting a pick back overall. I don't really think that's how trades work, but that's kind of how the draft worked. They ended up They ended up up one more pick than they started the draft with. The Blazers also had 40, and then they traded 40 to 52 they swapped 40 for 52 with Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City gave the Blazers cash for that deal, and then Golden State bought, once the Blazers landed at 52. Blazers traded with Golden State, and the Blazers or the Warriors bought the pick, straight cash swap for 52. You can't buy first round picks. You can, but no one does anymore. And second rounders, this late in the draft usually get traded, or deep. 52 is only 58 picks in this draft, so deep in the draft, those are the ones that get traded for straight cash. Most of them get traded calculated for swaps and future picks like 34 did, right? If you're a little bit higher up, but then there's like a threshold where they go back. So the Blazers go in with 34 and 40. They end up with cash considerations twice over and 3 future picks in future drafts. The cash doesn't do anything. It isn't cap space money. It isn't. It's just. It is like a separate pool that you can use to send out in trades. The Blazers now have that. Ownership gets it. It's or at least it doesn't filter down to like player salaries or have an impact on the salary cap or luxury tax implications or anyway. Like it is a separate boat for those things. So they end up with nothing. I also want to clarify something I said yesterday. I misspeak on the podcast from time to time. In fact, earlier this week in a podcast that I listened back to of my own shows, I called Donovan Clingan Donovan Mitchell. That is misspeaking, but yesterday I didn't misspeak. I just said something incorrect. I described the pick that the Blazers sent to the extra second round, or the extra first round pick, that they sent to the Wizards as the worst between Milwaukee and Boston. And it's actually the second least favorable between 3 2029 picks, Portland's own, Milwaukee, and Boston. So it'll be the middle of those 2 picks. So it's not the absolute worst. Milwaukee might be bad by 2029. They're certainly they're a very old team right now. Older team right now, and they have probably a 2-ish year window to be really good, and then they might be in the desert for a little while. So that pick is fairly likely to be high. The Blazers, it's hard to know. They're certainly a couple years away from being a playoff team, but 2029 is far enough out that like you assume that they'll be better than they are now, but it's really hard to know. And Boston projects probably as still pretty good. So I think both Milwaukee and Portland's picks could be relatively juicy, but the Blazers give the Blazers, I guess you're hoping the Blazers pick stinks. It's deep in the first round, but the Blazers will give the second least favorable of those 2 picks, the middle pick between those 3, Portland, Milwaukee, and Boston. I just had that wrong yesterday, and I apologize. Don't record at nights. Again, sometimes I misspeak. Don't need to correct me when I misspeak, but if I get info wrong, I appreciate the flag there, and a couple of you emailed me and flagged that one as incorrect, and a couple commented on YouTube as well. So yeah, that's a quick correction. So here's where the Blazers stand now. They don't make any picks in the second round. The boat is full. Like they have a full roster by virtue of trading for 1 in 1 out. Denny Avdija comes in and Malcolm Brogdon goes out. That doesn't change your number of roster spots, and they draft Donovan Clingan at 7. That adds another roster spot, and now it's basically a full boat. If they guarantee Delano Banton's non-guaranteed contract, they pick that bad boy up. That's a full roster, and they're going to run it back. That would be weird. But the Avdija deal also gave the Blazers a little bit of flexibility. Let's talk about where they stand and what might be coming next in the second segment. Join me there, won't ya? First, though, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by Gametime. It's the place for last-minute tickets. It's the app that rewards you for procrastinating. And if you didn't heed my information that I shared with you yesterday on the podcast, that the Portland Timbers are playing host to Minnesota United FC, the Loons, on Saturday. Well, great news. You can still get great deals on the Gametime app. Right now, you can sit in the Timbers Army for $23. $23. You can yell, you can sing, you can dance, you can play in the smoke when they score. One of the great fan experiences in all of North America. Certainly one of the great fan experiences in the state of Oregon. But if maybe the dancing and the singing isn't your thing and you want a little sort of maybe a chiller atmosphere, but still go see some footy, you can get in the building for $35 over on the other side. 41 upstairs on the west side. If you want to sit on the north end, but outside the Timbers Army, $35, $31. Like good deals to go watch the Timbers play on Saturday. You go to the Gametime, go download the Gametime app and take advantage of the place that hooks you up with up to 60% off when you're buying last-minute tickets. You can take the guesswork out of purchasing tickets to your favorite sporting events with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the redemption code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right. So after the moves to, make a trade, acquire one of your draft picks, and trade away the others, the Blazers still stand with basically a full roster. We talked about this a bunch on the show, is that the roster was essentially full. But because the wheeling and dealing didn't include any wheeling and dealing of players on the roster, the thing is full. This is a full boat. The Blazers now have 12 guaranteed contracts. Technically, Donovan Clingan isn't signed, but he's going to do his press conference on Saturday, so he'll get a little introductory press conference in the beautiful city of Portland, in the Rose City. I guess I'll be in Tualatin, in the beautiful state of Oregon. But he will... he eventually will, and first round picks are rosters, are salary slots. It's like he has a salary based on being picked 7th. It's guaranteed for 2 years, and then back-to-back team options. It's a 2+1+1 for all first round rookie picks. So that's a guaranteed deal. That pushes the Blazers up to 12 guarantees. Then the non-guarantees or partial guarantees are Toumani Camara and Jabari Walker, non-guaranteed contracts. Toumani's in the game. Toumani has an outside chance to start, right? Like, I don't think he will, because depending on obviously some other moves to be made. But like, I think Denny Avdia and Jeremy Grant are your starting forwards as of today, pretty easily. But like, Toumani's going to play. He's good. He's a very good defender, even at this early stage in his career. He's going to play. No question about it. So he's on there. Guarantee him. Jabari Walker, it would be very, I think, like I've said this a bunch, there's a non-zero chance. There's a world in which Jabari Walker just gets waived, right? Like they just let him go. They don't guarantee his contract. But it's a very, very slim one, right? Like it's I don't know, under 2%. It's like incredibly unlikely, but I think there is a world where that happens. Like I said, a non-zero chance, but that's at best. You can pretty much guarantee him too. Like, I think he would be, as it stands right now, I think Jabari Walker is a night one contributor in the fall, right? He's a rotation player immediately out of the gate in the fall. So like, those two dudes are in. That pushes you to 14. And then the 15th guy is Delano Banton. He has a partially guaranteed contract. The guarantee is $200,000, and then it's fully non-guaranteed. He could be waived in January, like with no penalties. He will get paid while he's on the team, but like, just to be, if he hits his guarantee date, it's $200K. It's a very small number. That would be 15. That's a full roster. They don't have any two-way guys. I don't think they've waived technically any of the two-way guys, but you can do that anytime. So it's like they have 3 two-way spots, but none of those guys are eligible for two-way spots the way it works, or wouldn't be converted to two-way spots in the way it works. Like, it just doesn't work. That's a full roster. The Blazers can't run it back. They can't. They can't. I mean, they could, but they can't, right? They can't. That would be bonkers. So there is more to come. Like, there are trades to come. There are deals to be made. If the Blazers do nothing and run back this 15-person group, I will lose my mind on this podcast, and I will lose my mind for several months, because we will just see this like slow-moving crash. This will be like a 2-mile-per-hour train wreck. But like, they're gonna do something. I'm not worried about that. I mean, I might lose my mind anyways, because I'm kind of a because I do this a lot, and I can tend in that direction. But like, yeah, like I think the trades are a coming. Now I'm going to talk about that in the third segment. One thing I didn't mention though, and this is related to the full roster. One thing I didn't mention in the Denny Avdia and Malcolm Brogdon swap is that it saved the Blazers some money, because I think on its face, rooting for your favorite basketball team to save a little money sucks. It sucks. Like, I know there is this like sort of obsession with asset efficiency that has kind of come to rise over the last, say, 10 to 15 years in basketball fandom, and that most people, or many people, I'm not saying most by any means, but many people sort of fancy themselves more GM than point guard, right? It's like people want to do the transaction game and get into the math and all that stuff, and so like there's a sort of ruthless efficiency of how smartly you can run your basketball team gets people jazzed up. But I never root for a team to spend less money. That stinks. That said, it's untenable for a team as bad as the Blazers to be a tax team. they were going to get out of the tax, and by trading Malcolm Brogdon to the Wizards and bringing back Deni Avdija on a very, very team-friendly contract, the Blazers are below the luxury tax line. According to Keith Smith of SpotRack.com, friend of the show, the Blazers are now $4.2 million below the luxury tax line, and that's including the Donovan Clingan money in there as well. Yeah, you get a little wiggle room. On its face, who cares? This is the only reason saving money would matter. Now, the Blazers are able to take back, up if it's 4.2, up to $4.1 million in money if they make future trades. And I think that really matters. If they were going to be really expensive, if they were going to run it back and be really expensive, they were going to kill some of their flexibility. They were going to push up, if they'd made both of their draft picks, they would have been a first apron team, which would have really prevented some of the moves that they could have made, or they would have had to not sign guys kind of deep into July and then made some trades without signing their rookies, kind of holding out, say, hey, hold on, we got to make some moves before we make this deal official, and make sure the order of operations kind of click together so you could not technically be a first apron team, even though those players have cap holds, but it would be more complicated. So like they get to this spot where they're under the luxury tax line, and I think it is worth celebrating and that's if they make trades to utilize that little bit of wiggle room. If they make trades to improve the roster, or if not improve the roster, improve their asset base, like improve the future of the team by taking on a little bit of money in future trades. And the ability and the flexibility to do that and the wiggle room to do that is important. The reason that you celebrate them getting under the tax line is not because you feel very thankful for the Allen estate, and I don't think people do. I just think there's this celebration of financial efficiency. But it will be worth celebrating if the next series of moves include them being frugal, or not being frugal rather, and being shrewd with taking on a little bit of money. Okay, we could take back, we're like the Blazers are now can go into negotiations and say, hey, we're a team that's below the luxury tax line, and we can take back this, a little bit of money, and particularly teams that are trying to shed and get, and they're trying to shed money in the coming weeks to make either free agent signings or just to kind of make sure that the roster is cheap in the right way. The Blazers can now be a team that can facilitate that. And when you can facilitate that, you can ask for extra things, and you can ask for extra second round picks, and extra second round picks can help you do things like sweeten the pot to trade for young wings like Deni Avdija. And in the future, second-round picks are going to be incredibly valuable, because as more teams get up in the second apron, the second-round pick exceptions are going to be one of the few sort of ways that really expensive teams can add players to the roster. See the New York Knicks. It's more valuable for them to do it in that way, and we'll see moving forward is and you saw Minnesota do that too. It's like they traded for Rob Dillingham, and it's like the only way they could have added a player making as much money as Dillingham is to do it via trading for draft rights. That's the loophole. And so having draft picks and having those, having sort of those in the future it's not going to be wildly valuable, but it has some value, and the Blazers kind of loading up on future seconds, and maybe getting a few future seconds to take on, $2 million extra of money to save someone a big luxury tax bill. That matters. And I think getting under the luxury tax line could be valuable in that way. But they're not going to run it back, are they? 15 players from, and largely the exact same returning roster, flip Brogdon for Deni Avdija, which I really like that, in terms of practicality of the roster and things making sense, and adding Donovan Clingan in place of Moses Brown. I really like that too, but that can't be all that they do. And in fact, I don't think it will be. And I think the way Joe Cronin spoke to the media after draft night 1. He didn't do media after draft night 2. There was only one planned media, and he kind of he spoke about what he was going to speak about, and he said, I don't think I'm doing this tomorrow, so ask your questions. But the way he discussed the roster didn't make me think that things were done by any means. And then he did this thing that he's done a couple times this offseason. He just won't mention Anthony Simons. He's just not mentioning him. Whether that's intentional, unintentional, or an obvious tell, which I believe it is, he keeps not mentioning him. He won't mention Ant. What the heck is going on? Let's talk about it to close the show. Join me in that third segment, won't you? First, though, I want to tell you 3 words because this show is brought to you by eBay Motors, and eBay Motors wants you to know the 3 most important words are passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you're always going to find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts are guaranteed to fit every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, baby, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, I'm still a pass first point guard. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers, and I usually introduce myself too and say that I'm Mike Richmond. Let's keep it rolling. Joe Cronin won't mention Anthony Simons' name. Whether it is a choice that he is making intentionally, whether it is just a slip up that he keeps, he's doing too many things in his head in the press conferences and he keeps slipping his mind, or it's an obvious tell. We have now sat through 2 postseason press conferences with Joe Cronin, and he has very, very much not mentioned Anthony Simons. He did it once in the immediately postseason ex-interviewee type press conference where he mentioned there were some good things that happened this season, and he didn't mention Anthony Simons. And then he kind of had some other comments, and finally he was asked very directly about Ant. He said, "Yeah, he's a really good young player. We're really happy to have him. All those things." But he didn't mention him on his own. He didn't bring him up on his own. He didn't mention him on his own. He was very much just If Aaron Fentress of the Oregonian hadn't asked him specifically about Anthony Simons, he wouldn't have mentioned him at all. And at the time, it's that's a little weird, but whatever. But it was notable to me that I was that's a little weird, but sure. At the same press conference, Anthony Simons said, I want to win. I want to play for a winner. I'm heading into year 7 and I want to win. As if he has no impact on the results of the game, but that's for a conversation for another day. But obviously the team is not very competitive and that Ant can only do so much. But then on Wednesday, after the night 1 of the draft, Joe Cronin he didn't, he was asked once kind of about, hey, can Klingon and DeAndre play together? And he kind of skirted it. And then it's asked him again. He said, yeah, they could play together. And then finally, but it wasn't he mentioned, and why I mentioned that is because he didn't say, okay, well, we have all these parts and we think that they could be complemented by Anthony Simons. They just didn't come up. But when those answers didn't come up, it's no, sure. He wasn't asked a direct question about it or something more broad that would kind of bring Anthony Simons into the mix. And then Bill Orm of the Oregonian asked, I'll offer this to my young journalists out there. He asked a simple, open-ended question. What's next? Where do you go from here and what's next? Bill Orm actually has said this to me before, and I think Bill's the columnist for the Oregonian, friend of the program. And he said to me before when we were discussing media in general, he said, bad questions get good answers all the time. So you don't have to ask a great question to get a good answer, but the best questions are open-ended and short. And when Bill Orm asks a short, open-ended question, he gets a response from Joe Cronin. Says, okay, well, we've got 34 and 40 tomorrow, so we're going to navigate through the second round, and we're going to do the best we can to build around. I'm paraphrasing here, and we're going to do the best we can to maximize and build around Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe. That's not Anthony Simons. You could argue Anthony Simons is the best player on the team. He's 25 years old. He's certainly the most dynamic offensive player in terms of demanding attention, and obviously he's a bad defensive player. But I think there's a pretty reasonable case that he's just the best player on the team. And he didn't mention him. And when he, it is telling that now at twice when the opportunity to kind of just praise a really good young 25-year-old guard, Cronin, it's not like he's trashed him by any means. He's just omitted him. And the omitting him seems to me to just be too obvious at this point to ignore. I don't always bring this stuff up. Like I'm not always highlighting this stuff, but I think this one was too obvious to ignore. We're going to maximize Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe. Joe was also asked directly about kind of, are you going to trade the other vets? And he said, I'll be opportunistic. I can't say either way, but I'm always going to be, I'm always going to take advantage of an opportunity or keep my opportunities, keep my options open, right? I think that was kind of a say nothing quote. Like, I don't think that was meaningful in any way. He just kind of said, like, obviously you have to try to trade players, but I don't think that was a very strong quote in either direction. But I think the omission of Anfernee Simons in that one sort of innocuous answer where he wasn't asked something specific and he just kind of gave the approach of what's going to happen in the immediate term with the second round and then in the future, and not mentioning Anfernee Simons as the player you're going to maximize around gives me a sense with the way that Cronin talked at the end of the season and the way he talked here now. It's just like the way he talked, in the draft night now. It's like, yeah, I think they're going to trade Anfernee Simons this summer. I think it's obvious. What they get for him and how they do it, we'll see. But I think it's incredibly clear that this full roster and all of that stuff just means that they're going to move into the next stage by being involved in the trade process. And I mentioned in the second segment sort of the luxury tax situation and all those things. And on Sunday, free agency begins. Teams can start. It's the moratorium period. You can negotiate with free agents that are on other teams beginning Sunday at Sunday afternoon here in Portland. The Blazers aren't going to be a player in free agency. They don't have a path to creating cap room. They're not a good team, so you don't really sign free agents with when you're not a very good team. They're just not going to be a player in free agency. The way that they're going to improve and change the roster is on the trade market, while other teams might be wheeling and dealing because they're in free agency. And the moratorium usually sparks the beginning of some serious movement. This weekend should be a lot of fun, and next week should be fun, pretty darn fun, as well as we kind of get into like the real transactional season of the summer. It's a fun time of year as teams make their moves, like draft right into free agency. It's a fun week. Then you get summer league, and then kind of like things die down for a little bit, but we get the whirlwind for that first week of July. It's reported by Matt Moore of Action Network and the host of one of the co-hosts of Locked On Nuggets, that the Blazers would be willing to trade Jeremy Grant, but the asking price remains high. Here's what I think, and I've been saying it a bunch. They had to trade Malcolm Brogdon. They did it. They did a pretty darn good job. Denny Avdija is a really nice prize from that, although I think maybe the pick part of the deal was a little bit steep, but maybe on the back half, we will never remember it because Denny will be really good. And I do think it addresses like the exact thing they needed. And you can't be too critical when you address an exact thing you need with a young player under team control. It's pretty good deal. So Malcolm Brogdon was the first one, but the guys we talked about, it's like they have to explore trades for Jeremy Grant. And I think they will. And I've been very consistent here since the offseason started, that my tune kind of changed. I wasn't you have to trade Anfernee Simons, but I've moved to the point where they should trade Anfernee Simons. Have to? I'm not that far. I don't think it's not a problem if he's back, but they should trade Anfernee Simons. They should explore it because he has, I don't know how much value, because I don't know how much value that his archetype of player has out in the open market, like a not quite point guard who doesn't defend is like not exactly in high demand. Big players who play both ways are in high demand always. But Anfernee Simons is a good and a useful offensive player, and in the right team, he's very good. Like he's in the right situation, he's very, very useful. And if you can identify the right situations, I think you can maximize his trade value. And I think the Blazers are going to trade him. I think the tea leaves suggest that a trade is coming this summer and that they will explore deals for Jeremy Grant. And while the roster is full now, the boat is full now, and it seems like they're going to run it back, there is just enough evidence that suggests that they don't want to do that. And for me, that's a great thing. It's a great thing. Because you only get so many cycles to try to do this and improve your roster and do these things. And when teams typically they get into training camp and get into the early part of the season, they kind of want to see their roster play out. Like now is the time that you can actually maximize a deal, and otherwise you kind of have to wait until you get back into sort of that January, February, getting into the free agent cycle or the trade deadline cycle again. This is the week to get it done. And I would say that there is some evidence based on the omission from the lead decision maker on the team that it could happen. It's not a guarantee. And perhaps this is, like I'm reading the tea leaves here. I'm not reporting anything. I am merely saying this has happened enough times that we, a couple different times in public settings, that it is telling what is not being said. I am a big proponent, and if you're a longtime listener to the show, I've been saying this for many years. When the lead decision makers talk, it's important to listen to what they say, both for what they say, whether you believe it's objectively a lie, whether you think it's a telling little nugget, or what they choose to omit. In this case, what they choose to omit. So we're going to build around Anthony Simons. We're going to maximize Shaden Sharp and Scoot Anderson is a telling omission. So while the boat is full, the Blazers have a little bit of wiggle room, $4.2 million under the luxury tax line, to continue to upgrade the roster and take on more salary than they send out, which could be valuable. They have a mostly full roster, and the change that they're going to be able to make, the significant change over the next week, is going to come through the trade market because they do not have a path to having meaningful cap space. So you're talking mid-level exception money, which is not a competitive offer for a team in their situation because you'd have to give the full mid-level, and that puts them in another sort of cap situation that they probably don't want to be in. And they're just not going to be, they're not a good enough team where a free agent is going to say, I would love to play for the Portland Trail Blazers. All things being equal, I want to go play for a better team. And the Blazers probably aren't looking to upgrade via veterans in the trade market or in the free agent market. They're looking to shift things around, continue to collect assets and young players on team-controlled deals like Denny Avdia, like that can long-term team control that can improve the team in the sort of near term and grow with the team as they get better, because they're still in the get better mode. They're not good enough to try to go for it. So it's time to probably trade some veterans and continue to try to move some stuff around to continue to see what you can be. And I'd bet, if I had to, that over the next 3 weeks, Anthony Simons finds a new home based on what we've heard. That could be interesting. We'll see what happens. Next time you hear my voice, we will be through. I'm probably going to record, to be honest, here's how the first day of free agency works. Some stuff happens right away, then kind of things trickle in. And then the end of the night is typically about like midnight on the East Coast, maybe 1 a.m. on the East Coast. So that's like 9 or 10 o'clock. So I'm going to record pretty late on Sunday night. So usually I record the Sunday show kind of in the middle of the afternoon, or sometimes even in the morning, and it'll be in your feeds like Sunday in the middle of the day. No, it's not going to be there in the middle of the day because I'm going to wait for the first sort of wave of free agent stuff to happen. And the next time you hear my voice, we will talk of day one of free agency in the NBA. It's a fun week ahead. This is what we do 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, and also on YouTube, the Only Daily Trailblazers podcast. We keep rolling through all of July. So come back, tell your friends. If you're a new listener, I'm so thankful to have you. We're just getting started for a fun off season. So keep rocking with me. Free on all platforms. It's also on YouTube. Tell your friends. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.